Zealot, Exway Flex, WowGo 3X.
These three electric skateboards are arguably the top alternatives to the now defunct boosted boards. They have many things in common, but they also each have their own unique selling points. If you're new to electric skateboards, it's probably hard for you to tell what's different about them, but that's okay, I'll tell you everything. Before we get to the differences, let's talk about what these boards have in common. Today, all three of these boards are around $700 after discounts. The Backfire Zealot is $694 if you use an affiliate discount code. The Exway Flex is $702 if you use an affiliate discount code. And the WowGo 3X is $705 if you use an affiliate discount code. The prices and discounts may change, so be sure to check my website dkwan.com for the most up-to-date discounts. All three of these boards use the form factor popularized by the boosted longboard. Flexi deck, separate enclosures for the battery and speed controller, belt drive motors, etc. They look similar from a distance, but they're all actually using different parts that make their ride characteristics different. These three boards don't all have the same acceleration and top speeds, but to me, they're similar enough that if you're choosing from among these three, speed should not be a deciding factor. It's also worth noting that all three of these boards use different sized wheels and use slightly different sized gears. These are things that you can change on your own to affect the speed, which is another reason why I feel the little differences in speed between these boards should not affect your buying decision. With that said, all three of these boards have a higher top speed than how I normally ride, and they all have enough torque for me personally. I've said in other videos that very few boards have brakes that I feel are actually good. By that I mean good brake strength and also good brake control accuracy. In my opinion, these three boards all have good brakes. They're strong, predictable, and intuitive. So those are some of the things that the Backfire Zealot, Exway Flex, and WowGo 3X have in common. They're all great boards for the price, which is why I chose them specifically for this comparison video. Now let's talk about what's different about them and what you should actually consider when choosing one of these boards. While all three of these boards use flexi decks, they are all different and have their own pros and cons. The Backfire Zealot has the longest deck and also the longest wheelbase. The WowGo 3X is slightly shorter, and the Exway Flex has the shortest deck and wheelbase. In terms of the area where you can actually stand, the Backfire and WowGo are about the same. The Exway definitely feels shorter, especially with the wheel well flares. In comparison, both the Backfire and WowGo feel a lot more roomy. The concave of the three decks are quite different. The Backfire's deck is relatively flat except at the edges where they angle up quite a bit. It's easy to feel where the edge of the deck is with your feet. The Exway is the only one with the wheel well flares, and I feel the most locked in or one with the board when I'm on the Exway. The Exway deck is also the only one that can take 120mm cloud wheels without risk of wheel bite or your foot touching the wheel. The WowGo's deck is the most similar to the loaded Vanguard, which is basically a very shallow concave that you don't really notice. In terms of flex, the Backfire's deck has the most flex, and the Exway's has the least. I personally feel that Backfire's deck is a little bit too flexy, and I'm only 69 kilograms. The flexiness does help absorb road vibrations quite a bit though. Exway's deck is the most rigid of the three, but it definitely still flexes, unlike the Exway X1 series. If you like low to medium speed pumping, I personally feel that the WowGo deck is the most appropriate. This partly has to do with the trucks also, which I'll talk about next. If you're a beginner and not too familiar with different types of decks, I wouldn't worry about this too much. Until you develop a personal preference, none of these decks are better or worse than the others. They're just different. All three of these boards use pretty decent trucks. They can all be set up for stability at high speeds or for carving at lower speeds. But out of the box, they do have some major differences in behavior. The Backfire Zealot uses a Caliber 2 50-degree truck in front and a Caliber clone in the back. The front truck is using the standard blood orange 89A bushings that come with Caliber trucks, but the rear truck is using unbranded 95A barrels. For me, at about 69 kilograms, this setup is really stable at high speeds, but I found that I had difficulty carving at low speeds. The back of the board is just too stiff for me, even with the truck set as loose as possible. I have a feeling that they're using such hard bushings in the back to prevent the motor covers from touching the cables. If that's the case, then I'll probably have to increase the height of the board a bit with risers when I switch to softer bushings. The Exway Flex uses Exway's Trist trucks and is the only one of the three to be using forged trucks. In theory, these trucks would be less likely to break than the Caliber and Paris trucks and their clones. I think these are very well designed trucks, and the stock super high rebound bushings that come with the Exway Flex are also really good. Carving's great on this board at any speed, but I did come across an issue since my initial review. The motor cables seem a little bit worn, probably from the motors rubbing against them sometimes during hard turns. Visually, they look fine. If others hadn't told me about this issue, I probably wouldn't have noticed until the wires inside the cables became exposed. Exway is aware of this issue and they have a solution for it. They're going to use bigger and harder bushings. I don't know if that's a good solution, but it's a solution. I'm going to add a 1/8 inch riser, and that should be enough to prevent the motors from touching the cables. You might want to do the same. If 1/8 inch is not enough, then use a 1/4 inch riser. Aside from that issue, which is a really easy fix, I think these trucks are great. Exway also has precision washers, which you can purchase separately to further fine-tune how you want your board to behave. The WowGo 3X uses a Paris V2 in front and a Paris clone in the back. The front truck uses Paris barrel bushings, and the back, I forget. With the stock bushings, the back feels too loose for me and I have to tighten the rear truck quite a bit more than the front. But once I have the trucks adjusted properly, I feel like this board is arguably the best one out of the three for carving. The WowGo uses 1/4 inch risers, which is probably why there's no issue with the motors touching the cables. The risers combined with the Paris and Paris clone trucks likely contribute to this board feeling more carvy as well. Remember, I'm talking about these boards with stock bushings and stock risers and all that. For beginners, if you don't want to be changing parts to personalize your ride, I think all you need to know about these trucks are that out of the box, the Backfire Zealot is the most stable, and the WowGo is the best for carving. The Exway is kind of in between, but it also has the advantage of having the strongest trucks. To estimate the range of these three boards, all you have to do is look at the battery capacity. The Backfire Zealot is 311 watt-hours, the Exway Flex is 259 watt-hours, and the WowGo 3X is also 259 watt-hours. Like I said earlier when I talked about speed, these boards all come with different wheels and use slightly different sized gears. Just as they affect speed, they also affect range. But they're similar enough that the Backfire should have the most range just based on the battery capacity. Not only is 311 watt-hours 20% more than 259 watt-hours, the Backfire is the only one to be using 21700 cells, while the others are using the smaller but more common 18650 cells. To get a rough estimate of how much range you would get on each of these boards based on your weight, visit my website dkwan.com. For me, at about 69 kilograms, I should get about 31 kilometers on the Backfire and 26 kilometers on the Exway and WowGo. This part is going to be very subjective. Zero effort went into making the Backfire Zealot look better than its predecessor, the G3. In fact, it looks a little bit worse. I'm totally fine with the purple color scheme, but this shade of purple against this shade of gray looks like a blotch from a distance. The logo on top is not parallel with the edge of the deck, at least on my unit. Whoever applied the grip tape probably messed up. The logo on the bottom is stretched vertically. On the G2T, it was stretched horizontally. On the G3, it was actually round, but somehow they messed it up again. I have other complaints, but I don't want to nitpick for 10 minutes in this video. The enclosures look as stylish as before, the ambient lights are nice, the remote looks pretty cool. Up close, the Exway Flex by far looks the most polished out of the three boards. The enclosures look awesome, their choice of materials and textures look great, the deck has a dynamic shape. I asked Vic why they didn't make the deck black, and he said it's because this is their budget board. The WowGo 3X borrows the most from Boosted Board's design. That's not necessarily a bad thing. After all, the WowGo 3 and 3X look way better than their previous generation boards. The enclosures are kind of boring looking, but I suppose you can just call that minimalist design. Aside from being high quality boards for the price, two of these boards have unique features that help them stand out from competitors. Like its predecessors, the Backfire Zealot has a turbo button on the remote for additional torque and speed. Actually, all three of these boards have a feature called turbo, but Backfire is the only one that added a dedicated button for it on their remote. The ambient lights I actually like more than I thought I would. At first, I thought they were just another gimmicky feature, but they do help you become more visible when riding at night. Plus, they look kinda cool. The USB port on the battery compartment comes in handy, especially if you have the optional headlights. If you want to charge your remote and headlights at the same time, you can use the 3-in-1 USB cable that comes with the headlights and just plug them all to the board's battery. This is probably the most convenient way to recharge the headlights, since you can't easily detach them. The headlights are a separate purchase. They're brighter than shred lights, but they're also more expensive. Like Exway's previous boards, the Exway Flex allows you to update the firmwares for the board and the remote through Exway's mobile app. This to me is a huge benefit of owning an Exway. Your phone, camera, drone all benefit from firmware updates to add new features and make them perform better. Exway's app also allows you to enable, disable, or customize a number of other features. Standby mode lets you turn on the board using just the remote. Free mode turns the brake control into reverse, just like boosted. The acceleration and brake curves can be adjusted, etc. Exway's smart battery offers a couple of very useful benefits. You don't have to purposely discharge your battery for long-term storage, because the Exway Flex battery will do that by itself if it hasn't been used for a week. The battery indicator on the Exway Flex is way more accurate than the indicators on the other two boards. This might not sound like a big deal, but it's one of those things where once you have it, you don't want to go back to what you had before. The Exway Flex also has optional stuff that you can purchase separately, like Kegel pulleys, precision washers, bash bras, and the quick charger. I highly recommend getting the quick charger. The WowGo 3X has bash guards built into their 1/4-inch risers. I think that's about it for its special features. Oh yeah, and it looks the most like a boosted board if you're into that. I don't personally have customer service experience with these three brands, but if you spend any time on the electric skateboarding subreddit or Facebook groups, you'll quickly see what kind of reputation these brands have for their after-sales service. Ever since 2017, Backfire has been praised frequently for their after-sale customer service. Backfire also has the advantage of having multiple warehouses across the globe, so they can get replacement parts to their customers relatively quickly. Exway, I think, used to depend on their distributors for after-sales service. I don't know if they still do that anymore. I get the impression that they now rely on their brand ambassadors, at least partially, for that kind of stuff, but they do also provide customer support by email. Of the three brands, WowGo seems to have the most spotty reputation for after-sales service. They did say, though, that they're working on expanding their customer service capacity. If you're looking for a belt drive board with a flexi deck, today these are the three boards I suggest you look at first. They each have their pros and cons, and I hope I've given you enough information that you can choose for yourself which one is best for you. Look in the video description to find out how to get the best deal for each of them. If you're wondering which one is my favorite, obviously it's This video is sponsored by Defective. Get your Kwan merch and e-skate inspired apparel and stickers at defective.com. Defective, not defective. That's DFFECTIVE.com.